Hey, gorgeous people. Happy Monday, March 24th, and welcome back for another week of astrology. This week is absolutely brimming with fire and brimstone astrology. Brimming with brimstone. Sure, let's go with it. We're diving right back in so that we can finish chatting about everything under the sun before I have to get up and make a second cup of coffee, which I will do if it comes to that, but let's hope. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. Today, we are going to be talking about a Mercury cazimi happening today. We are going to be talking about this week's transits, a Venus-Neptune conjunction, a Mercury-Neptune conjunction, both happening in Pisces. We're going to be talking about a big Aries eclipse. And we have a little historic transit called Neptune's first ingress into Aries in well over a century. Very casual. To help break it all down, I've invited my friend and fellow astrologer, Sarah Paasch, to talk about how this is showing up for all of us and some symbols and songs. And we get into some movies that we can look to try to understand how this might be feeling. But first, we're going to kick things off with a few messages that really made my week on socials. Before we get to those, if you're looking for some one-on-one astrology time with me, now is a really good time to book. I am booking for mid-April, and I am also booking for April and May rounds of my planetary transit tracking class called Planetary Rhythms. Both of those links are in the description, so hit those if you want to understand how some of these historic transits are playing out in your life, or maybe just want to understand how things are unfolding on a smaller scale a little closer to home. Okay, let's get into it. First things first, I have two comments. Both are from YouTube this week, but I will say it's been really awesome to see everybody reaching out to me via DMs on Instagram, client sessions, emails, YouTube comments. It has seriously meant the world to me. It's taken me a long time to get this idea into the light of day because it is so chaotic. My brain works like a weird just constellation, I guess, pun unintended, but welcome, a constellation of craziness at all times. And it means truly the world to me that anyone is finding this valuable, interesting, exciting, and that you guys are here on this journey with me. I appreciate you. So one of the comments that I wanted to point out, Senor Silly or Senior Silly or Sir Silly, somebody out here referencing Alice Bailey's The Labors of Hercules in astrological interpretation, which is actually a really awesome looking astrological text. I have not personally had the chance to read this book, but this comment about Alice Bailey's description of Aries through the myth of Hercules and her astrological interpretation clued me in, and now this is definitely on my to-read bookshelf. So Senor Silly says, Alice Bailey's description of Aries in Hercules and astrological interpretation and like the two dogs reminds me a lot of how back and forth and dual-natured Aries can be, especially right now with Venus and Aries. It's totally the rude but I love you spice in that Pride and Prejudice scene. For sure. There is a reason that Aries and Gemini get along so well. Both can be quite dual-natured. Also, Aries is quite representative of not just birth and genesis, but rebirth and resurrection, which is a theme that we looked at through the solstice. And that actually comes up a lot in today's conversation. So maybe check out this text from Alice Bailey. Super Scary Sarah says, not sure why I just found your YouTube, but this was awesome. This week is already gearing up to be crazy. Apparently sleep is eluding me tonight. Could it be the time change or the eclipse or because I suddenly decided to quit smoking today? I hope the eclipse is going to help that. Well, if nothing else, I would imagine an eclipse in Virgo with the most discerning and discriminating of the signs, opposite a Saturn cazimi, to be really good at helping with that. Good luck quitting smoking, Sarah. I hope that works out for you. And to your other notes, eclipses, especially lunar eclipses, and this eclipse in Virgo was a total lunar eclipse, it is a disruption of the moon's light, and therefore it is a disruption of the moon's significations. The moon orbits the Earth. It is the only traditional body that we track that orbits the Earth. So a disruption of the moon's light really often has to do with the disruption of our sleep schedule, our digestion, all of those normal patterns of life can be disrupted during a total lunar eclipse. All right, I'm super excited to kick it back to myself one day ago when I sat down with my friend Sarah Paasch. We were discussing these transits of the week. There are a lot of things going on, and our discussion was pretty wide ranging. We talked a little bit separately about what was going on in Aries versus the two transits that are happening in Pisces, but a lot of the references and things that we talked about really incorporated significations from both of those signs. I think you'll find it pretty interesting. Here we go. All right. Hello. Hey, Sarah. Welcome to my lovely show without a name. How are you doing?
I'm doing really, really good. Thank you. I'm excited to
Yeah,
be here.
me too. I'm excited to see what references you've cooked up and what kind of interesting anecdotes you can add to the fray. I am really excited to hear your point of view because you do have Mars natally in Aries, and I'm excited to. I mean, we just vibe so well, I think, for many reasons, but that's a big, big part of it for me.
Yeah, no, there's a lot happening in the Aries part of my chart in my seventh house. And so these all feel deeply personal and exciting and charged in a good way.
Well, I am really thrilled to be talking through these transits with you because you're such a talented astrologer and I really admire you and your viewpoint on astrology so much. Let's dive into the transits. First things first. We have kind of a packed week, honestly, and that's part of why I wanted to have you on because from the 24th through the 30th of March, we have some of the most energetically abrasive, perhaps aggressive, definitely astrology of this whole year. Like starting out hot, this is the list of transits for the week. We have on the 24th of March, the sun conjoining Mercury at 4 degrees Aries. On the 27th of March, Venus leaves Aries and re enters Pisces and then conjoins Neptune at the end of Pisces. On the 29th, we have a partial solar eclipse, which is a supercharged new moon at 8 degrees Aries. And then on the 29th, Mercury actually leaves Aries and re enters Pisces and conjoins Neptune. And then finally, the next day on Sunday, 30th of March, we have Neptune entering Aries. So even that alone would be sort of a historic place to begin and give us an hour's worth of things to talk about. We're going to try to punch our way through some of this stuff in the next 30 sips. Meanwhile, this week, the moon is moving from late Capricorn all the way into early Taurus, obviously forming a new moon eclipse in Aries along the way. Okay, should we get into it?
Let's go.
Let's go.
Let's
Let's
do
start
it.
with the, let's go.
I know I was
Let's
trying to
start.
be really Aries there. Let's go.
Cracks knuckles. Let's
Yeah.
go. Yeah, let's start with the Mercury cazimi. So, Mercury cazimi or Mercury conjunct the sun. This is a beautiful little transit. And we talked a little bit about this on some of our previous videos, but I'm always going to talk about these transits with a little bit of a beginner's mindset. The Mercury cazimi is a time when Mercury is directly in the heart of the sun, directly conjunct with a number of minutes, less than a degree inside the heart of the sun. And this is happening on April 24th at 4 degrees Aries. This is really a blessed little transit that I think can feel like a revelation coming from outside sometimes, or it can feel like grease on the wheels of communication that might be coming from inside you. That's more of an expression. So, this is a time I really feel for expression that is both honest, but also tactful. Like, I'm so keen on the fact that Venus is in her sign of exaltation in Pisces, the queen of tact. And I was looking at this transit thinking of this quote that's just like misattributed and attributed to so many different people, but it's something to the effect of honesty without tact is cruelty. And that feels super relevant for what's going on this entire week, but especially kicking it off with the Mercury cazimi. If there's some news that you're wanting to deliver or some sort of like difficult transmission, try to remember that tact piece and call on Venus and Pisces to do it.
Yeah, that's great advice. I feel like that should also be bookmarked for just Neptune into Aries as well. So we're just bookmarking that. Yeah.
Yeah. What kind of things were coming up for you for this Mercury cazimi?
So for all of these transits, the movie that came to me for this, because what we're really doing is we're building to this Aries solar eclipse, this
Yeah.
final Aries solar eclipse. And it was to me the arc of the movie The Matrix. And I feel
Mm,
like this because it's this rebirth of identity, this rebirth of the I am. And it feels like this
Yes.
Mercury cazimi is the moment that he chooses the red pill. This is the moment where you are confronted or something is reflected to you to have this sort of recognition and this understanding of choice and who you are. And will you decide to go into the place of the unknown and further investigate, this potential? That was the came to me was like out of that movie, this is the moment where he's actually has to make that choice and he chooses the red pill.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Red pill generally, this is evoking so much. And I think you're right about the sequence of events and how a lot of this is building up to the solar in Aries, but even further out, foreshadowing Saturn, Neptune, and their conjunction, their historic conjunction at 0 degrees Aries. Those events alone would be bringing up and evoking the red pill in some slightly different connotations
Mhm.
in different ways.
I think March 2025 is so much of this placeholder to foreshadow the greater changes that are going to unfold over the next decade with these major outer planet transits. So these retrogrades and this eclipse, this is such a pivotal starting point. And this conjunction feels like that moment of choice, that moment of seeing and choosing and knowing that this choice is going to have a subsequent awakening to a reality beyond our previous defined reality, right? Like the previous
Yeah.
stimulation of what we were living.
There's so much of that wrapped up in the Saturn Neptune. I know we're kind of like now we're forecasting out, but it's so related to what's happening here that Saturn Neptune feels like we've talked about this a little offline, and I hate talking about mundane astrology through the lens of like politics, but it feels like some people have sort of like departed from a generalized consensus about reality. And some of that is really productive, and some of that is really destructive, which is super on the nose for Neptune, right? There is such a thing as productive illusion,
Mhm.
like that quote that's like my favorite pastime is staring at the corpses of dead trees and hallucinating, which is a euphemism for reading. That's a productive illusion. I like to read. I like to watch a movie. Those are productive illusions. But there's also sort of unproductive illusions. And I think that there are people who are sort of obsessed, borderline obsessed with seeing beyond, seeing the reality beyond, seeing the big picture at work, conspiracy theories, and all kinds of stuff like that that's going on. And obviously, The Matrix is a movie that is so much about that
Mhm.
and feels quite prescient for these transits. That's a great,
Yeah.
great reference.
And especially potent for the what I think is the focal point right now is the main character development within
Yeah.
ourselves and our own lives. And that definition of the I am that's being developed or reworked and rewritten within us. And this is the moment where we say, let's find out who I am. Let's step into this unknown place and take a risk.
Yeah, the stuff happening in Aries, it's this week, it's the Mercury cazimi, it's the Aries eclipse, and then it's Neptune entering Aries. There's sort of like a separate storyline that's happening with Venus re-entering Pisces to immediately conjoin Neptune and Mercury re-entering Pisces to immediately conjoin Neptune. But the Aries stuff really does feel like an individuation crisis, maybe a point of genesis, certainly perhaps a reckoning. There's so much about this specific Aries eclipse that feels related to individual natal astrology. That series, there were others in the series, like April 2024, felt more global in its tone, more
Mhm.
direct, and a little more like a reckoning for sure. Some sort of
Mhm.
like big reverberations. This one feels very personal. And so that kind of aligns with just these general themes of individuation.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. What did you have for the Kazemi?
I have this song that is such a random song, and I don't even think I can fully describe the contents of the song on this humble program. But let's just say it is about a man. He's singing. It's called Red Handed by the Deer Hunter. And it's a man sort of accusing a woman that he is infatuated with, at least perhaps in love with, and it's part of this concept album, so it's kind of the crescendo of this arc, and he's accusing her of cheating on him, and then he sort of humiliates her in the song dramatically and somewhat violently, and then in the main reveal of the song, walks it all back and just kind of says, "Oh my gosh, you would never do that to me. I'm so sorry for even accusing you of that." And
Mm.
yeah, I know it was really uncomfortable to be honest, because that to me feels so in line with the themes of what's happening if we think about the choreography. So we had Venus and Mercury move into Aries, and they're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm not going there. I'm going back to Pisces, where they both have like some dignity right now. And meanwhile, the sun is bursting through and is just like providing this magnanimous, undeniable, indomitable truthful eye expression. So, a lot of what was coming up for me about this Aries stuff, but particularly the eclipse, like, let's start talking about that because it felt like this moment where a blazing kernel of honesty and truth is like bursting through social niceties what that everyone's
Mm.
kind of retreating from. It's like the moment where it's like you can't handle the truth, that kind of moment of explosion, and everyone's just like kind of their social niceties and maybe their empathy is kind of retreating. And for me, I was also like in movies, honestly, I was thinking of Desert Sun. And there were two in recent memory that stood out to me. The first was Blade Runner 2049. A little spoilers here for Blade Runner 2049, but essentially, this was like that feeling that Kay had throughout the movie. Kay is a replicant, meaning he's a clone. And he has all this yearning and wishing and hoping that he was born, that he was not a clone. And he's doing all this digging, thinking, am I actually secretly born? Trying to unravel this mystery. And in the end, he goes into radioactive Las Vegas and he meets Deckard. And basically, Deckard is like, you're a clone, dude. You weren't born. And he has this like very cruel reckoning. They actually have that conversation while they're physically fighting one another in the radiation seeped desert. And when he learns that, it really devastates him, but it immediately calcifies his resolve to make a difference in the society at large
Mm.
in a way that actually probably wouldn't have happened if he had learned that he was born, he would have gone on probably like a vision quest to like understand what it means to be a human that has a soul. But instead, he found out this really cruel truth like, you're not a human, you're a replicant. And because of that, he goes on a very different quest to like save the world more broadly and to rehumanize the world more broadly as a
Mm.
replicant. That felt like a really one of those painful acknowledgings that was like almost brutally true, but necessary to hear.
I think that also leads so beautifully into the Neptune moving into Aries just after this eclipse, too, as well, because there's a return to a deeper mission, a broader, bigger mission that's beyond this just the self or the scope of the self. So he moves from this quest, like you're talking about, where it's all about the self. It's all about, figuring
Yeah.
out if he's a real person. And then it's like, it's not even about that.
Yeah.
Who really cares? It's so much bigger than that. And now my purpose and my actions and my drive are going to be able to actually reach farther because I've moved
Yeah.
beyond just
Ugh.
this journey of self.
So the other one that was coming to me was Dune II, when Paul is speaking to his mother, Jessica, who's at that point become the Reverend Mother, which is such a Pisces figure. It's kind of
Yeah.
silly. But she basically implies that even though the religion that the Bene Gesserits introduced to Arrakis isn't true or real, she says like we've given them hope. And Paul like freaks out and has this aggressive outburst that actually is so jarring that it even is a little bit offensive as an audience member. Like you really react to it and it's mixed, the sound is
Mhm.
mixed so it's so loud and he's like that's not hope. She's like we gave them hope and he goes that's not hope. And that feels so much like what's happening in Aries. It's like all this Pisces swirling Jupiter Neptune soup that's like bringing up these weird dreams and making things hard to see. Meanwhile, in Aries, the sun knows what's true. The sun knows what's right and what's
Mhm.
real. And it's like, here you go. I'll show you what's fucking true.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, I can totally see that correlation. The rage that comes out, the enragement that he has. And that also ties to the energy of activism that I feel is very much a part of this story and this dialogue between this Pisces Neptune dance that these planets are doing right now.
Yes. What was coming up for you with this eclipse, or do you want to talk a little bit about how you're thinking about it or how it's feeling to you?
Yeah. So actually, it was still tied into the Matrix, and
Yeah.
it was the scene which you can look at the YouTube clip of when he is the one. That's the scene. And in this scene in the Matrix, this is the moment where he essentially dies in the simulation, and the guy shoots him over and over and over and over, and he falls to the ground. He collapses, and you go back into the I don't know what it's called, but like their ship or whatever, where they're monitoring him. And she tells him that she is no longer scared, that she knows that she loves him and that he is the one and that he doesn't have to be scared. And he goes back to the simulation, it shifts back focus, and he wakes up. He lives, but he rises with a completely different embodiment of who he is. He is willing finally to say and own that I am the one. And then he completely dominates, right, the entire scene. And for me, I guess what that felt like is that representation of a partial solar eclipse in Aries. We're eclipsing the sun. We're eclipsing this I am. We're eclipsing the ego, this identity, and that identity crisis that you've talked about. And it can feel like that struggle of death. Like I'm not real. It doesn't matter. But it's actually the thing that precedes that moment of being born into something so much bigger than you were giving
Yeah.
yourself permission before.
Ooh.
So that death rebirth energy is where I was feeling. And I felt like once that happens, it's only when once that eclipse serves you that opportunity to go through that threshold, then Neptune moves into Aries and you're willing to take and behold, right? Like the mission that is being granted or given to you.
Yes. Ooh, I love that so much because that scene and the movie generally, it's not just about like love, it's about her belief in him as well, which is obviously a core Pisces and Jupiter theme. But her love, which is Venus exalted in Pisces here,
Mhm.
gives him the belief even in himself. And their shared belief becomes kind of like fuel. And resurrection is such a important theme for Aries generally. That goes back into all sorts of ancient mysticism and the ways that that ties into later Christianity. That's a little outside the scope of this program, but it is a really important theme there. And I love that tie in. I think there's such an interesting tie back to some of these other eclipses that happened in Aries. And it's interesting because the eclipse that happened in April 2024, it was at that time there was a Saturn and Mars conjunction in Pisces. Whereas now we have Venus and Saturn conjunct in Pisces. Mars instead in the realm of the moon still at this point. And that's just a pretty softening switch there. In some ways, we still are dealing with the same core significations. The moon is eclipsing the sun, and therefore, there's a sense that circumstances here on Earth or the lunar sort of material events are creating a disruption in this solar, divine, unchanging, daily system. Whatever your cosmology is, that's kind of how the ancient Greeks thought of it. So I think it's a pretty significant change that we have the benefics a little more activated in some ways in this one instead of this great malefic conjunction that, in the case of April 2024, literally no one could see the eclipse because it was fog. It was overcast all over
Mhm.
America. So it
Mhm.
was pretty mean.
Yeah.
It wasn't that kind, to be honest.
Yeah. I think it was just that there was more work to be done
Yeah, great
before.
point.
Yeah. I love this as the grand finale and the timing of it
Yeah.
correlated with all the other transits happening around it. It is like the grand finale of what has to happen in order for us to enter into the Saturn Neptune story into Aries, being that holder of that story, that main character. We had to go through everything we've gone through in the last year to really finally be ready to say, okay, I'm no longer going to deny this power or this version of myself that's ready. It's okay. Like we say yes. It's the moment of that hero's journey where there's a lot ahead of us that we don't know, but we're willing to take it. We're willing to say yes to the journey.
Yeah, you and I did a year head workshop It's excellent. You can still check it out. We did horoscopes for every, not just rising sign, but for every sign, right? And what we talked about for Aries was really this archetype of an exhausted leader. Specifically, George Washington was coming through a
Mm.
lot for us when we were talking about that, which is just, America's like, hey, guy, you led us through a war. You're going to be our king now, right? And he's like, no, what? What the fuck? We just got rid of that. No, I'm not going
Yeah.
to be your king. Okay, well, you'll be our leader, right? No, I don't want to be doing that. I just did all this other stuff. And then sort of just being haggled into a presidency and being an incredible leader and having the wisdom and the leadership required to walk away from that kind of power at the end of his terms, which didn't even really
Mhm.
exist then. They would have just let him be president forever. There's something there about the tired monarch. And it was actually coming through for Leo as well for us. So that's where the sun is at with these series of eclipses. And looking at the condition of the sun in the few days leading up to this eclipse, we have a Venus cazimi, then a Mercury cazimi. So there is aid coming in and there are messages coming into that Aries part of us. Another thing that came up for us was Brene Brown dare to lead. So it's like there are messages
Mhm.
coming into our daring to lead and to step into that leadership role in
Yeah.
whatever it is that the Aries part of us wants us to do.
I think in a very real level, a personal level, there's been ways that I've been experiencing this where that inner conflict of I want to do this, but I'm so tired. I don't know if I can do it. I haven't been able to do it before. It's exhausting, like that exhausted leader you talked about. And there's this building angst that's happening because there's that call, there's this push, there's this readiness. And in order to do that, in order to step fully into that, there has to be this acceptance and an agreement that I'm not going to identify as a person who's exhausted by this anymore. That I actually can do this. I am capable. And maybe it won't be that hard, but I have to identify myself in a new way as the main character that's taking these things on.
I love the word agreement with Venus in play. And
Mm,
also tying back to the Matrix and some of the other things we're talking about, like Dune 2 and Blade Runner, it's like not just agreement, but also belief. And not just being resigned to our fate, but like believing now it's possible. Maybe from a place of deep
yes.
skepticism, maybe from a place of being really tired, or like Kay and Blade Runner, really disappointed, or like
Hmm.
Neo on the brink of death.
Hmm.
But having some belief that carries us through, and maybe even some, Venus is so social and so collaborative and loving. So maybe there are also ways, as we're thinking out of this Virgo eclipse, maybe there are good kinds of interdependence. Maybe you're a people
Yes.
pleaser and you're tired of that, or you have hangups or baggage or inherited stuff around interpersonal relationships. But that stuff can be true in addition to the fact that sometimes we do need other people and we do at least
Yes.
even need someone else's vow that they believe in us or see us or are going to love us even if we fail.
This is a topic that I've been having with so many clients. It feels like I'm looping like on a record player with them, and they don't know that anybody else is having this conversation. So I think that makes it even more poignant that it's happening is like they can be true at the same time. We are fully responsible for taking care of ourselves. There's nobody else but us that has to be the one to say yes. Like I'm responsible for me. And we never truly ever do anything alone. We require as human beings connection in order to survive, in order to move forward and progress. And yeah, I agree with everything you're saying. And I think that's why the astrology of this moment, having the inner planets so much a part of the story is this is not just a personal experience. There is the social aspect that's happening or the relational part that makes it so much deeper of an experience too.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about that in depth a little more next month on the Nightlight Astrology podcast. My co host Whitney there and I are doing a whole session on how Venus specifically, but the reality is that both Venus and Mercury, you and I know because we've looked out at this year, hold hands with the outer planets and make connections with the outer planets throughout the entire year that integrate, soften, inform, and mediate these outer planet collaborations that are happening with specifically the Pluto Uranus trine and then their shared sextile to Saturn and Neptune across that Aries Pisces border. It's really significant. Venus and Mercury holds both of those planets' hands over that border. And
Mhm.
then even next year, it happens again. This fall, it
Yeah,
happens through those trines. It's really significant.
it's definitely loud. Yeah. Yeah.
It's one of those series of transits that for me feels honestly like I'm looking at the machinations of the universe. It's one of those that makes
Oh,
me
that's so cool. Yeah.
question things on a big level. I'm like, this is too conspicuous. This is too perfect. There's something going on here. I don't have to know what it is,
Yeah.
but I see it. So we've been talking about all of this Aries stuff that's going on. We have the Mercury cazimi, we have the eclipse that's happening, and sort of simultaneously to that, we also have Venus moving back into Pisces, the sign of her exaltation, and conjoining Neptune at 29 degrees Pisces. And then we have Mercury doing that as well. Mercury just hours after the eclipse. It's like Mercury stayed in Aries to bear witness to what was going down in there and then comes back into Pisces to conjoin Neptune. And I wonder if you'd like to walk us through a little bit what you're feeling for Mercury and Venus conjoining Neptune in Pisces, this last dance moment.
Yeah, totally. I had a little bit of a separate sense of how these transits are impacting us. It felt like Venus's transit, while it's still totally interwoven into the story of the I am and that arc of that character development, it feels deeply relational. And it feels like there's this process with this Venus retrograde that's bringing us back to a greater sense of who we are and that self-expression. But it's also tapping us into, because of that Pisces and Neptune influence, the deeper longings of our heart, those desires, the passions, the creativity, and the things that we've sacrificed potentially in our lives before this point in order to maintain a sense of relationship, a sense of belonging, a sense of this is who I have to be in order to maintain this status quo. And that requires me to make sure that this part of me does not show up. And so the Venus Neptune, specifically, the archetype that I was drawn to was the Little Mermaid. And the movie, the original Little Mermaid, because I realized that the newer version is different while still maybe could work. But
Hitting the high notes. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But this journey of somebody who is just longing to see the land and the life on the land and wanting to leave the sea. That's so much of leaving Pisces and wanting to go into Aries, wanting this new adventure of life and what life could be like. And then getting to do it, getting to explore it and experiencing it, and then falling in love and realizing that then she's told by Ursula, the sea witch, the false power, so to be, that in order to do it, she will have to sacrifice her voice, her self-expression, and that she will grant her wish if she accepts this trade, this exchange. And so the Little Mermaid says yes. And then a whole series of things happen that end up bringing her to the realization that she's not going to be able to have this love without losing her voice forever. And so she is confronted with this false reality, this misunderstanding, but at the moment it feels true. Like it's an either or dichotomy. Like I can either have my voice or be in love forever. I can't have both. And in the movie, she sacrifices the love, she gets her voice back, and then it ends up that she actually gets transformed by the true power, I think, that it represents, a divine power that gives her legs. And so she gets to live happily ever after with her true Prince Charming. But I think that for me, what I'm recognizing in a lot of people too is there is this awakening that's happening around what has been sacrificed in order to belong or to be in a relationship contract that doesn't truly resonate with the deeper part of them or the whole part of them. There's a separation within themselves that's had to happen. And there's this retrieval process that's happening where the first step is acknowledging, I think, when Venus crossed Neptune direct, saying, I do have longings that I have been dismissing, that I haven't acknowledged. And those have been now acknowledged. And now it's a process of going into that place and retrieving those. So I don't know if that fully forms into a place that makes sense for you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I talked a little bit last week, or maybe I guess it was 2 weeks ago at this point, about the Venus cazimi and how that Venus cazimi really felt like a last dance moment with the sun and Venus. Venus retrograding back into Pisces, her sign of exaltation, sun moving direct into Aries, its sign of exaltation. And it felt a little bit like that moment where you know that the relationship is over. You're both headed in different directions that you have to be headed in and that you want to be
Mhm.
headed in, and you just know that
Mhm.
you're different people. Obviously, that doesn't have to be a romantic relationship. It feels a little bit like that scene with Triton and the mermaid at the end that you're talking about, where she's like, "This is not where I want to be. This is not where I belong." And he's like, "Well, I'm, I'm the king of the sea, so I'm definitely staying here." And they part ways and they end up doing their own thing. I think that's such a beautiful tie in with Venus about those relational dynamics and so much of what happens in the astrology of this year and how it unfolds. With Jupiter moving into Cancer, we get a grand air trine August, September, October. Then it turns into the grand water trine in October and November. There is so much work for so many people, so many natal charts that is unraveling and unwinding our hangups, for lack of a better word, around interpersonal stuff and the ways
Mhm.
that we serve others and what we give up. And that theme of sacrifice that you identified is so present in that Venus eclipse that just happened on March 14th as well. That was opposite a Saturn cazimi, essentially.
Yeah. So I feel like this Venus retrograde conjunct Neptune might be the moment where you sort of come to terms with the longing that is true that you want to claim, the thing that you're saying yes to in matters of the heart or relationship, and being willing to sacrifice those false beliefs or those false idealizations or the romanticizing of false power that you were giving before. And she feels a little like she's being cleansed and humbled and brought to a place of offering. It feels like a moment of offering, of saying, I'm willing to give up the jewels and the garments and the prestige because what I really want is true love. That's what I really want. It's something deeper. So that's where I feel like it feels like a very healing moment as well with this
Yeah, I think so
Venus.
too. Their first conjunction was on the first, I want to say, of February. Let me look that up. Yeah. Their first conjunction was on the 1st of February when Venus was moving direct through Pisces and she conjoined Neptune. It happened at her degree of exaltation at 27 degrees Pisces. So it was very palpable. Like for a lot of clients and friends and people that I talked to, they could really feel the difference that weekend. It was a weekend. And I just heard from so many people, I had an incredible weekend. So I wonder, perhaps that's something to think about. Go back and look at what you were doing around the 1st of February and see if that's tied into some sort of realism or, to use Sarah's phrasing, sacrifice that is being demanded or perhaps gently encouraged that you could lean into and leverage at this time.
I think offered, but I don't think that you can just move forward without making the sacrifice or making that offering. I think there has to be that humbling that has to happen in this moment.
Mm, that's so beautiful. Last thing I want to talk with you about is a little old transit called Neptune moving into Aries for the first time since 1875 is when it left Aries last. It was there from 1861 to 1875. This is such a rich, historic transit. We live through only so many Neptune transits because it spends about 14 years in each sign. And it really is, with the outer planets, something you can track back through the centuries and get a flavor right away. So, just looking in a preliminary way, I'm not obsessed with mundane astrology. I like my kaleidoscopic, eclectic, ping
Mhm.
pong brain astrology,
Mhm.
like we were talking about. But some of the things that came up for me when I was just looking at the previous times Neptune has been in Aries, it's like telling such a clear story. So, going back as millennia, we've got the Crusades taking place. We've got Henry VIII breaking from the Church of England specifically because he wants a divorce, but like starting an entirely new church. Martin Luther finished his translation of the Bible into German, thus democratizing the Bible for
Mhm.
people. Lots of religious zealotry through the ages, but also there's something very Ariesy about this forceful, sort of like strong arming of religion down into a democratic expression. Sort of interesting. Right now, we're deliberating choosing a new pope on the eve of Neptune moving into Aries. Who the
Wow.
fuck is this pope going to be and what are they going to do? Let's find out. But I was just listening to Life During Wartime by the Talking Heads and googling my sweet little brain away about Neptune and Aries. It's just such a enormous and historic truly shift.
Yeah, I was mostly focusing for this conversation on, again, the archetype of the I am development and the personal individual relationship
Hmm.
to this transit versus collective. So for me, what was coming through for Neptune and Aries, and again, I can't say it enough, the fact that it's punctuating the eclipse, that it's happening just after the eclipse. If there's something that feels like it comes into a place of completion with our own characterization. And then Neptune arrives, and it's like this tidal wave of momentum and energy and belief and divine, invisible, guidance and synchronicity and support to move us forward on that journey. And it feels deeply inspirational. It feels, when I think about Neptune and even religion, it's like there's something that we are holding to give us a sense of security in a world that is just innately insecure, right? That is just
Hmm.
impermanence is part of our existence. But when we have something to believe in, this thing that carries us through. And I feel like Neptune and Aries is so much about determining for yourself, Aries, what is the thing? What is the cause? What is the purpose? What is the creative passion? What is it that you are inspired by? What is the thing that's infusing your purpose with meaning that's beyond just yourself? Back to like the Blade Runner, right? There's a
Yeah.
greater collective vision of impact that you desire. And that will be fueled in a supportive way by Neptune. And I think using that as the anchor to carry you, and also having to define not only what the purpose is, but also what are the principles. Because the Neptune in Aries, while it can be really exciting because we suddenly have this self-belief and we have the energy and the activism to say, like, this is the thing I'm going to fight for. This is what I believe in, and I'm going to do it. It can also be blinding. It can be that blinding sense of confidence or zealotry that you're talking about, where you forget in a Neptune way, you're disillusioned to forget that you might be causing harm or you might be causing destruction on this path of something that's so important. And so, what are the principles that are going to hold you and guide you and humble you through the next, I think it's through 2034, right? Neptune's
I
going to
think it's
be
like the last with all the retrogrades. I want to say it's 2038.
okay. This isn't one eclipse. This isn't one lunar cycle. This isn't a Saturn transit, even. This is a very long transit. And so I think thinking about that when you're also considering what you want to do with this transit is thinking bigger and longer into the future for how it can develop and evolve and live.
The way that I've been coaching my clients and friends and thinking about this even and talking to you about this even is that Neptune's ingress into Aries at the end of March really opens a period of dreaming. Dreaming is a radical act. Dreaming is an act of creation. And from Neptune's ingress all the way through April, all the way through the end of May, once Saturn comes in the end of May, Saturn's going to want to put you to work. Saturn's going to want to build the systems and handle the logistics and make it a mature and actionable course. But Saturn in Aries is okay with being a maverick kind of dreamer, outsider type. So it's sort of a complementary energy in that respect. But April and May are about the action of dreaming. And when we
Mm.
talked earlier in this show about that tired leader archetype, summoning up the energy, remembering your beliefs and your why, Neptune can help you do that. And part of the ways that Neptune communicates so effectively is through art and literature and movies and all the good stuff that we love chewing through on this show. Definitely invest in whatever images and art and stories make
Mhm.
you feel the way that you want to feel in the future. That act of dreaming doesn't have to only come from you. And that's part of maybe that Piscean support that we have, is that we do have support from art and beautiful things and other thinkers and other people. It doesn't all have to come from you, but I am highly recommending, if not strong arming people into dreaming through all of April and May. All the corny things, do whatever feels authentic to you. Don't stress your authenticity. Don't do something you can't find belief for. But if making vision boards or writing little letters to yourself or whatever it is, writing a story about a day in your future into this new era and this new door and era that you want to step into.
I love the dream big. I love the future visioning. I love calling that in and really emphasizing in your point, the you that is the one carrying out and manifesting this dream. I think it's so important with Neptune and Aries that we are not just focused on all the, I want the, the engagement or the big house or the dream job. It's like reflect back on the individual that attains that. What is it about you that reflects that you're seeking or you're hungry for, that you're ready to step into and you want to evolve into? I was thinking about how I'm watching this unfold for a client who has Aries in the 10th house. And I think another side of the coin of this Neptune and Aries is how Neptune can support the confrontation of self-doubt and self-fear, or fears and
Mm,
self-doubt that previously kept us potentially playing small or hiding from the dream. And that comes back to the why. It's like when you, and this is so Neptune, where it's like, it's not about me. She's a creative, she's a feature film writer, and she's really stepped into this talent, this passion. And she's confronted with the part of her that's afraid of failure, that's afraid of hearing the no's, of the rejections, of going outside of her comfort zones and putting herself out there in this way. And when she comes back to that Neptune quality of why am I doing this? What was the reason it came to me, this inspiration, this passion in the first place? And she raises it back to that bigger purpose because she has like a beautiful collective purpose and intention and an impact that she wants to give. It's like it's not about her. She has to sacrifice her ego involvement with the manifestation of the dream of the project or the creative life in order to allow it to come through. She has to do that. So it's helping her to be like, I just have to put myself out there. I have to take the risk. I have to be scared and do it anyways. So she's accessing new places of bravery and courage, even when she doesn't have necessarily the confidence, because she's sacrificing the self attachment to what she's doing.
yeah, that's so brilliant and beautiful. It's bringing me back to Blade Runner 2049 when Kay is like, it's not about me and I'm a replicant, but I am now willing to. I mean, he literally goes to combat to defend this new future that he sees through this sort of like replicant liberation group. It's a whole thing, but that's seems so tied in and so relevant. Thanks for bringing it back to the I am.
Yeah, of course.
All right. Well, I think that that is our time. And I believe that we could speak for another 7 hours about all this. And I believe we
Yeah.
will offline, frankly. But it was
Yeah.
really nice to have you join us. You want to tell everybody where they can find you?
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much for having me, everybody, in this like morning coffee tea time. This is so fun. Yeah, so you can find me on my website. It's www.sarahpaasch.com, and all of my offerings are on there. I'm also fairly active on social media on Instagram and on TikTok, and it's just my name. So it's Sarah_Paasch. Reach out, DM anything. I'd love to hear from you guys and be in connection. But this was so fun. I always love talking astrology with you, obviously. This is what we do. But thank you.
This is what we do all day, every day. And
Yeah.
I'm really honored for you to be my first guest on my show. So thank you.
Oh, it's such an honor. Thank you.
All right.
Cheers. The No Name Show.
What an incredible interview with Sarah. If you're looking to find her and her work, you can hit the links in the description. I have officially reached the all ice portion of this iced coffee experience, which means that it must be time to end the show. Make sure you leave a comment letting me know if anything that we've talked about this week resonated with you. And otherwise, I will see you in April.
Have you ever heard of the gorilla video, the selective attention test?
No,
Have you ever heard of this? No?
no.
You should do it. But that was going to be my Mercury Neptune. It's a YouTube video. It's an exercise of selective attention. So it gives you an assignment.
It just sounds so right up my alley that
I know.
I'm
I kind of want to
stunned.
talk about it. Let's just talk
You
about it. Let's talk
clocked
about
me. I'm stunned.
Mercury retrograde conjunct Neptune. And there's this exercise called the gorilla video, and it's a selective attention activity. So you go onto YouTube and you watch the video, and it starts by giving you instruction to count how many times a basketball is passed between people in the circle wearing white. There are people wearing white, and then I'm not going to give away too much. Well, actually, I have to for the
You
sake
have
of this
to, but
explanation.
I think I
Yeah,
have done this. I just have not done this
it's
video.
so crazy when you do it and you don't know, when you don't know what you're doing and you watch this video and so you do it and you're so focused, you're counting this basketball, you get done. And I did this in a group exercise once, and the person presenting said, okay, raise your hand if you saw the gorilla. And nobody raised their hand. So then they play back the video, and there is a fucking gorilla. There is a person dressed in a gorilla costume just standing in the like back center of the scene the entire time. And I think this Mercury retrograde conjunct Neptune is this moment we've taken this red pill, we've said yes, and now the process of disillusionment is starting to happen. We're starting to awaken to seeing things that were previously, because of our selective attention, because of our wanting or willingness or unwillingness to want to look at certain things. We're so focused on only seeing something that it feels like there's a retrieval of awareness that wakes us up to also that reflection to ourselves. What was keeping me so focused on, like, what was my internal assignment to count the basketball passing? Feels really exciting. It doesn't feel like it's necessarily going to be the most fun transit in that
Right.
sense, because awakening is painful, but it also feels so refreshing as well. So there's a revelation that comes through that Neptunian process of disillusion of what was a false reality or
Yeah.
false focus.
Yeah. Neptune has been going through Pisces since 2011. And I suspect that anyone with Virgo stuff going on has felt called into that Pisces place, and that there's actually some other stuff that we all need to focus on. That Pisces
Yeah.
stuff is kind of a distraction. That's kind of not really what's going on. I love I love your point, and I love that we've approached this a little bit asynchronously, talking through the month, because first of all, that's how we live these experiences. But second of all, this is a process of unfolding that I think probably came in hot around the eclipse because of the way that eclipse was, the discernment required. I love
Yes.
this gorilla test, and I did do this at a Tony Robbins event of all places.
Yes, that's no,
He's
that's like the
like,
one of those similar events I was at. That's not
yeah,
surprising.
yeah. He's like, oh, look around, find everybody who's wearing red. Like, how many reds do you count? And you come back and he's like, okay, who's wearing purple? And it's truly shocking when you do it, because you really do realize how much we associate, first of all, what happens right behind our eyes with our sense of epistemological truth in the world,
Mhm.
but also just how limited our tools, our sensory tools really are. I love that tie in. I think you're spot on about that.